I think the biggest challenge now is regulatory compliance. This is a whole new era, and the issues that clients are facing at the moment are ones that they haven't previously faced. We've always had regulation, but right now the extent of that regulation is so significant, and it really is on a global scale. I mean, I think it is affecting managers, funds themselves, their fiduciaries, their advisors, directors, administrators, and in fact all the service providers. And there really is now an emphasis on a culture of compliance. And even if people didn't have that in their own firms before, they now have no choice, because the extent of the regulation is so significant that they actually just have to comply. Well, I think the biggest thing is investor communication. Frankly, this applies to any business. It's not just in the funds business, but any business at all, whether you're trying to manage the expectations of employees or you're trying to control and manage the expectations of investors. The reason traditionally, obviously, that investors will invest with a particular manager is for performance, and that I think is still the #1 factor. But in order to sustain confidence, particularly now, given what's happened over the last couple of years, it requires a different level of investor communication. And that is not just about newsletters and making phone calls, but it's also about generally allowing investors to understand that the firm itself is compliant, they themselves take it very seriously, they have their own culture of compliance, and that they are doing whatever they need to do within the bounds of the law and to comply with the regulations. Investors are more active than ever before. In the past, investors would accept the fund terms that they came in. When they came into a fund, they would have to accept whatever terms were on offer. And so if they didn't like the terms that were being offered, or the investment objectives changed, or they no longer were happy with the performance of the fund, they could just redeem. They could pull out their money in accordance with the terms of the fund documents. In other words, they vote with their feet. The thing that's changed now is that investors are far more demanding and far more discerning, and they won't simply accept the fund terms. They will negotiate, whether by way of side letter or particular terms for a particular class. And I think the effect that that has had is it's actually put more power into the hands of investors, and they are now doing much more than voting with their feet. They're mobilizing the investor base, and at least where they have the right to vote on particular issues, they will cause the fund to take action. And that could be by requiring the board of directors to be removed, or at an extreme end, actually petitioning the court to wind up the fund and put in a third-party liquidator. And we've certainly seen an increasing number of those petitions being brought by investors who really now want to control the destiny of the fund and ultimately their own destiny. Yes, you'd be surprised actually. There's been a real uptick, and I think that is bolstered by the fact that we're in an era of compliance. Obviously other regulators and other jurisdictions are also bringing proceedings against managers that they regulate. So for example, the SEC is increasing its level of proceedings, and the nature of those proceedings have broadened, and that's happening across the globe. Well, if they do have the right to vote, then they can call an extraordinary general meeting of shareholders and require the fund to take action in a particular way. But of course, they have to get the requisite majorities, and they have to have the investor base on board. If they want to terminate the fund and wind it up, I mean, that really is a class remedy. So if it's being brought by one shareholder, they're effectively bringing it on behalf of all shareholders. If they don't have the voting rights, then their last resort might be simply to issue a winding up petition. And that is quite an extreme example of an investor taking action against a fund. But as I said, it's now happening with increasing frequency. And I think we're going to see a few more of these petitions being heard over the course of the next couple of years. Generally, I think it comes back to the question of communication, being extremely open and frank with investors. That's always been the best approach, and it's no different now, and particularly in this era of regulation.